I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show we have a rock star, a writer, a humanitarian, the legendary Bif Naked. I had such a wonderful conversation. She's such a sweet person, which is, on her website, she is labeled it Namaste with horns. She has this great reputation for pushing the boundaries of just about everything as a punk rock icon. But she's just such a nice person, too, and really wonderful person to talk to. Her career highlights have taken her around the world on tour for over 20 years now, and into your homes via the Tonight Show and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and a number of feature films. So, we explore a little bit of her career, but I was more interested in her lifestyle, her struggles, her overcoming her challenges that she has faced, and then the good that she's been able to do with it. So it was a real pleasure for me to chat with her about the evolution of her career, but also the evolution of herself and her spirit throughout her incredible, long-lasting, and still going strong career. So here's my conversation on So-Called Normal with Bif Naked. I was thinking all night about where I wanted to start this because you have such an interesting story, such an interesting career, I think, that's evolved over the years. But I'd like to start with your tattoos. Can we talk about that?
Cool. Yes.
Because, we're it's an audio-only podcast, so I'd like to talk about your tattoos because I hardly ever know what the fuck I'm doing, let alone...
Hilarious. Tattoos are very...
they're very visual, but
and they definitely, I think, over time they come to represent what a person cannot speak.
Right.
Often.
Yeah. So which of your tattoos represent that? What you weren't able to either speak at the time, or an emotion, or what?
Well, I think when we started getting tattooed, it was literally probably like 1990 or 1989 or 88.
Yeah.
Literally. I'm not going to sit here and say we were underage because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. But we started getting tattoos, and I'm talking about my little best friend and I, basically because it made us look tough.
Right,
Literally, that was why we wanted one. I was very into theology because of my dad, and I liked symbolism a lot. I got the Eye of Horus as my very first tattoo because I thought it was really universal. It's the all-seeing eye. It's the mother of truth. It was something I knew I would, appreciate having forever. I wasn't, it wasn't Tweety Bird. It wasn't, the skull and the knife through it or anything, which I would get now because it's funny.
Right.
But when I was younger, I took it very seriously.
Yeah.
And then over time, it just, I was learning about Taoism. I was heavily into Taoism, and I got the symbol for the way. This is Tao. I always had a real, I guess, connection with my birthplace, which is India. As an adopted kid, I had no other identity.
Right. I was just reading one of your bios. It says it's captivating. Whoever your bio writer was is really good. Or did you write it?
I'm not sure which one. There's a million versions.
I bet there are, but it says Bif Naked was born in secret to a teenager living in India, the product of a Canadian girl and a British boy. She was rejected by both families, hidden away in a mental hospital. That's a compelling bio.
Well, and it's not a lie.
No,
but,
sure.
it's a, I'm an effusive and flowery writer.
Right.
It's kind of like, my birth mom is only 15 and a half years older than I am.
Wow. Yeah.
And she was living in India with her parents at the time. It's kind of more simple than it sounds. It sounds extremely romantic and quite dramatic. And on paper, I suppose it is. But she's also adopted.
Okay.
And not having that connection to a heritage, plus my parents were American. I was the only Canadian in my family. But I just always felt like India was my only, kind of cultural identity in a way. And so a lot of my tattoos do reflect that. There's a lot of Hindu deities. When we first started getting into music, for example, some of the bands that were popular were like into Hare Krishna.
Right.
So particularly a band named Shelter that I was really into. They were like Krishna punks, and it was something that I really identified with and could enjoy and appreciate. And
I don't really know much about Hare Krishna other than the folks at the airport.
Of course,
right? So
course.
Like many people.
There's a big temple here, for example, in Toronto, and Govinda's the restaurant offers food to people like a lot of different parishes do.
Sure.
I don't know. The thing with my parents were Christians and very religious, and they raised us to be basically anything we felt like being.
Right. Your adoptive parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I liked it all. And my father used to accuse me of cherry picking. He said, you can't cherry pick religions just to suit your mood.
Right.
But I kind of, as I got older, I kind of just really believed that all paths lead to the same place anyway. And there are a couple of different religions that really believe that. There's religions, obviously, that I think are quite beautiful. I have one of my best friends is an atheist, and very intellectual and lovely and funny. But he thinks everything is magic beans,
right?
Ultimately, and it's not that he's wrong, but I think that people really often they really need faith if they can't believe in themselves or their families.
Well, yeah, I think that atheism, at least every manifestation of it that I've seen, is essentially a religion unto itself. It has a set of beliefs or non-beliefs, right? And I feel like it takes some work to be committed as a whole atheist, right? Because like you say, all world religions seem to generally point in the same direction.
Definitely.
Right?
And I agree with you. I think that with, people love to self-identify with something. And my atheist buddy, he loves to tell me that he's atheist, just like my meat-eating friends love to tell me how much they love their steak.
Or people who go to CrossFit, they love to talk about CrossFit.
And that's cool, And I just think, hey, fantastic, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think that people sometimes really need something to believe in.
Yeah.
And in this kind of weird time, this weird era that we're living in, I think it's not enough for people to just believe in themselves or their job or their families anymore. I think there's a lot of disillusionment that's happened over, since the beginning of time, of course, but I think now is kind of people are having trouble coping, and there's different reasons for that I'm sure a lot of scholars can talk about far better than I can, but I think that faith really helps people.
Was it important for you? You've been through a lot. You've overcome a lot. And was your faith an important factor in that, in pulling you through and giving you strength? Or what is it about faith that you resonate with?
Well, I think it's having not necessarily the rules, but having the opportunity to be grateful.
Right.
Ultimately, I think that at the end of the day, no matter what is happening in our life, people can still be grateful. And I always think that, for me, I've been through nothing compared to, some of my North African friends who've fled for their lives or seen their family members literally butchered in front of them. And somehow they still wake up the next day filled with hope and grace and determined, passionate to go out and still try and save the world.
Yeah.
And I just think that type of resilience and incredible amount of just, gratitude they still have for life, despite what they have seen, witnessed, and been through. Yeah. To me, that inspires me more than any written word.
I find that I've certainly experienced it myself, that gratitude is almost born out of that struggle in some ways, that resilience, that until you see the other side, it's hard to be grateful unless you know the difference, I think. You were adopted when you were a baby, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So were you raised knowing that you were adopted, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sister was adopted a year before me.
Okay.
And so she knew she was adopted. I knew I was adopted. Plus, my sister is Indian. I was Caucasian. My parents aren't Caucasian, but they were American, so that was a different thing.
Right.
And I got to be the Canadian, the only Canuck in the family.
And you were raised as a Canadian?
As the only Canuck. It wasn't even Canadian. My father would introduce me as the Canuck.
As the Canuck.
Yeah. And then he would introduce us as twins, even though it was very obvious that we weren't. That was just really how he loved to do things.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of always known. I've always felt very happy that I was an adopted person. I always knew who my birth mom was. For my 21st birthday, my parents flew me to meet her as my birthday present.
How did you feel taking that flight to see
amazing.
that?
I had been wanting to meet her since I was 15. I was convinced my birth mom was Sophia Loren. I was convinced she was this very glamorous woman because my parents were so modest and they were very austere. And I was a gregarious troublemaker, and my youngest sister, who's their natural child, was shy like my mother, and I was the opposite of everyone. I was gregarious and just ridiculously social and class clown and all those things. And meeting my birth mom gave me a bit of more context in a way, because she is exactly like me.
Really?
Down to the mannerisms.
So you're genetically punk rock?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It is incredible. And she's a realtor when I met her. And it's fun, to know the difference, for me anyway, what's environment and what is natural. And so I've always been really fascinated by that. And moving out here, I live close to my birth family. And so I've seen them several times since I've been here, and that's been loads of fun.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
So you mentioned you were raised in a Christian household, but it sounds like quite an open one.
Oh, definitely. I mean, my parents, again, my dad was a dentist. So he was a professor of dentistry, and he loved to dabble in theology and whatnot. And I think that in any household, for every family to have a book from every religion, I think is, it's gone with the way of the Encyclopedia Britannica now that we have the internet, of course. But for us, we were voracious readers. And there are so many different beautiful versions of books, from the Quran to the King James Bible is very different from the Good News Bible, for example. And again, it's all about words and language, and I'm always attracted to very flowery, descriptive writing, and the Torah is great. I love it all.
So you've always been something of an artist, then it seems like.
I guess so. I mean, anything. If you like being creative, anything is art, even cooking.
I love that. Yeah. When did the music piece start to come in? Were you always attracted to music? Did you
Never.
know that you really
Hated it?
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's okay.
I know. I was in ballet from the age of 3 until I was old enough to start smoking and wear a leather jacket, basically, much to my parents' chagrin.
I bet. Yeah.
And music was never something that I had any interest in. I wanted to be a ballerina, when I was very little, and then I wanted to be a choreographer, and then I kind of fell into being in theater. It was a very good fit for chatty me, and I went to the University of Winnipeg to study theater and met some guys in my class who were in a band, and it was really that simple. They said, you should come and come to our jam, basically. And it was a world music band. There were about 13 members in this band, drummers and singers, and it was just a very nurturing introduction into being in group music.
Right.
And one of the drummers from that band had a punk rock band.
Okay.
And they needed a singer, and that's really
how
it happened.
Yeah. So then finding your way in those early days, weeks, months, what was that like for you to try to figure out what it was like to be a performer, not just to have an interest in music, but to actually be performing music in a meaningful way?
Well, I think because I had a theater background, I had no
You're very comfortable
problem being on the stage.
Yeah.
But being in a punk rock band particularly, I was very determined to be taken seriously.
Okay.
There weren't a lot of females at that time in Winnipeg in punk rock bands. So, there were a lot of skeptics in their audience, and there were, it was a big sausage party for the most part. And so it was important to me, especially when I was very young, to not, I would refuse to be hypersexualized, even though, I could, sit here and quote Camille Paglia till the cows come home and say that was actually an impossibility, just given the fact that the only female these guys had seen on a stage was a stripper. So, I never took it personally if they would catcall or yell terrible things or throw things or anything. It just made us kind of tougher out of spite.
Did you experience that? People throwing things?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, of course. And every band that I know from my era of music, from Belly to the Lunatics to L7, I mean, we were used to it.
Right.
And, the show does not stop because, some loser is, yelling things at you. The show goes on, and you just basically act tougher, and I've had to fight on stage.
Sure, you really,
and that's something wouldn't happen today.
Yeah,
because these people wouldn't have access to the band usually, or whatever. But and there's part of me that looks at young performers today, and I have a really hard time with understanding the perspective of a young woman today because I'm so conditioned to accept all the garbage.
Right.
And so for us, we kind of used it as a challenge to make us tougher, stronger.
Sure.
Like I always say, like stabbing yourself with a fork.
Right.
Because they're going to make you into a canoe or a suitcase. It's some joke my father used to tell about somebody was going to be turned into a canoe, and the guy had one last wish, and all he wished for was a fork so he could poke holes in his skin. And I always thought that was an interesting way to describe kind of, I guess, being strong against any kind of, stressors.
Right.
Yeah.
It must have gotten to you at some point, though. Did you ever feel like, did you ever get tired of being strong all the time?
I think that it becomes a habit, and a coping technique like that really lent itself to being able to persevere and to have endurance on these tours. The first tour I did in Europe, I was probably, it was probably like 1995. And I was already a solo artist by this point. We were on our first record, and I was on tour with a band called Life of Agony. They were out in New York. I was a massive fan. They were on Roadrunner at the time, and we were on this label that was distributed by Roadrunner called Edel. And a lot of their audience was just not having any of me singing Daddy's Getting Married.
Oh, no.
Like, it was a very different audience.
Yeah.
And so they would throw things, they would yell things, and that was life. I mean, I used to go on stage in the beginning of the show and sing this song a cappella called Tellin' You, Letter to My Rapist. And that was something that I used to think was like going out on the stage and basically impaling myself in front of the audience. And after that point, nothing mattered. Like, that would be like the hardest thing to do, especially right out of the gate. And then after that, I was basically anything that they could do would never be as hard as singing that song. So it was kind of almost a deliberation, or do the worst possible thing you can do, and then after that everything is easier.
Everything's easy.
And it just really, I think that for me as a performer, it enabled me to really learn a skill set that perhaps, a lot of young performers today, they just will not put up with any raspberries.
Yeah.
They won't put up with any guff from their audiences. And the audience was different for me. It was a very aggressive, tough male audience.
And it wasn't even necessarily you just taking it, laying back and taking it. You were fighting back.
Absolutely. And by the end of the show, they were all fans.
Right.
And I knew that would happen because I worked so hard to do that and win the crowd over. And ultimately, the exchange between performer and audience is always, it always has a symbiosis to it. And even the most hardened, awful, judgmental punk rocker, skinhead in Vienna is going to soften, by the end of the show when he's, singing along to Lucky,
Right.
and that would be the victory every night and make it all worth it every single day. So again, it was like, I look back at all of that stuff very fondly, and I don't have any resentment towards the misogynists that I've run into over time, because I always really believed that it was never personal.
Yeah. Now, were your bandmates mostly men?
Always. Almost always. I should actually say I had Coco Culbertson was the bass player of mine for a long time. She was in a Canadian band called Taste of Joy. And then Gail Greenwood came into my band for a couple of years, which was a real blessing because she was a real mentor for me. And she's in Belly. So they're from she's from Rhode Island.
And were your male, especially at that time, were your male bandmates surprised by what you were facing that they weren't facing?
Not at all.
No,
it was not even brought up.
They felt really?
No, I don't even think
Did they support you? Did they?
Well, sure. Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the early days. I mean, I can remember, in Italy there would be, a lot of very impolite guys who now would be considered assaulting us. But we would just like physically throw them off the stage. The first time I got my teeth knocked out
the first
on stage was from a stage diver who was, they would come on the stage and then he left from the stage and his foot kicked the microphone through my teeth. And it was, it was a shame because it was fourth song into the show. And it was
that
like
would have been my first
1,500 kids. And it was like, oh, dude, really? And so we couldn't continue the show, and that was the worst part. I mean, eventually we did a makeup show, but, it was like being baptized. It was like the coolest thing that ever happened. We all just sat there laughing, making fun of me, and it was very cool. And it makes me laugh to this day. It was definitely a rite of passage.
Yeah. And what an incredible sense of community too. Like you say, whether even with your band, sure, but then with the audience to be able to enter into that thing together with them. It's
I just think that coming from a background of hard music was really a wonderful education for me, just in general as a performer.
How have you noticed you've been doing this, like you say, since you were a teenager, basically. So how has that evolved over the years? Now you're kind of an icon of Canadian music, so it's different now.
It is different. And when I went through breast cancer, I made a record because we were on a deadline, and I really had nothing better to do during chemo. There's just nothing else for me to do. I couldn't really go on tour.
Right.
Although now I know girls who've gone through chemo and then I've helped them work out their calendar so they can still tour and get back for their chemo. Treatment paradigms are a little different now. So, I mean, knowing what I know now, I'd probably do it differently next time. But I was at home and we made a record. And then when it came time to tour that record about 9 months later, I had just finished my chemotherapy. I had an ovarectomy and my hair started growing back and we went on tour, basically in that order. And I had so many physiological problems with the stage show. But of course, like a dog, I always say like a dog that gets hit by a car, you stand up anyway and you keep going because you're not going to stop the show for any reason. And I've missed only one show in my career, which was in 1996 in Regina because everyone had strep throat, and that was it.
No.
I've never missed a show. But I think that it didn't feel authentic for me after a little while, and I felt like I was lying. I looked very different when I went through chemo. I gained 45 pounds in a month.
Wow.
And that was very different for me.
Is that kind of weight gain typical for chemo?
It is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that because they just assume everyone in chemo is like end stage of life, wasting away. And that's not the case at all. Chemotherapy is often included with a steroid so that you tolerate the infusion, and it makes your lymph nodes swell up, and just a variety of different things contribute to that. And so, I learned I was anorexic my entire adult life, and suddenly I wasn't anorexic. So I looked very different. I didn't have the same look. My hair obviously was I didn't care when I had to lose my hair. But then when I went back to work, I realized I looked so different. And the audience was like, me doing the tour for the Promise record, to me, I felt like they were coming because everyone still thought I was going to croak, and that was their last opportunity to see it. But it felt inauthentic to me. And we were asked to do a number of acoustic shows just because I was doing some speeches for breast cancer, and they always would ask us to play. And it really felt very natural. And I felt comfortable, and I felt like I was finding a new identity. Plus, I turned 40, and it was like, I felt like I was just coming into being a real woman, and maturing. So finding my way over the last several years was a real journey. And I love performing acoustically. When we put the book out in 2016, book readings, they don't pay you a lot to go and read it at a bookstore. So what we wound up doing was enshrouding it in an acoustic concert.
Nice.
And then reading a story and then playing the relevant song. And we wound up making this 3-hour show that was a soft cedar venues, and I dragged my poor husband along as my guitar accompanist, and then I just make fun of him or my mother-in-law most of the night, and he drinks wine and kind of suffers through it. But it's lovely and it's fun, and I love it so much.
And how did audiences respond to that?
It was
different
amazing.
approach? Yeah.
And also my audience, I kind of didn't realize they all grew up with me.
Right.
And these girls were also turning 40, and they had gone through a lot. Any of us who, managed to survive through our 30s, we've already been through quite a few different life changes, whether it's, real heartache, breakups as adults, relationship breakups. Our parents are dying. Family pets die. We've had to do moves. We've lost jobs. Real things, adulting things that are, often very transformational for people. And people go through a lot of, I guess, hard times. Even with children, having children is actually very, very difficult for a set of parents, especially the first time. It's very transformational for people. So to have this audience come to these shows felt extremely special, and eventually we got back to doing the rock shows, which felt very much like a victory in a way, but that also made me realize it took me 10 years to feel normal after cancer treatment. And if that's the place where I started from and wound up, the book that I'm writing now is about really how women are kind of everyone says, that breast cancer is a blessing and they lose their identity and, how do they feel feminine? But it's really so much more than that, because the real small physiological changes that are still going on, residual changes that happen to a body in a person for years, and then they don't understand why they're not experiencing 100% health and wellness, and their families don't understand how they can complain because they survived, or there's just so many things. It's just been really, really interesting.
When were you diagnosed again with
So I was diagnosed and went through treatment in 2008.
2008. Okay. And I heard on another interview, you mentioned your reaction when you first discovered.
I am a clown.
How so?
I am the class clown, and I feel badly about it because it was actually the surgeon that I met with, even though my GP said, your biopsy tested positive. And I kind of knew it, because as they say, if you're intuitive, I'm not intuitive. I just chew gum. That's always my answer. But I kind of had a feeling.
Right.
And when the surgeon was speaking with me, it was the first time I had met her, and my then husband was in the room. He was a little uncooperative. Just our dynamic was not real cooperative because it was a stressful situation. And I'm quite comfortable with hospitals, and a lot of people aren't. He was one of them. So she said, "Beth, you have breast cancer," and then looked right at him and said, "Your wife will lose her hair." And, I always use that as an example of basically the healthcare system, because here's this really competent, lovely, compassionate surgeon who says this to my husband. That's the absolute first thing that she said. And that's probably because that's her conditioning. That's because every patient before me, that is the question the husband asked.
Right. Not if you'll live.
Correct.
If you'll lose your hair.
And I think that's very, very telling about our society and how we view our wives and mothers, when it comes to, female cancers, I guess. So I'm not great with silences or uncomfortable silences. And I said, Doc, don't worry about it. My husband's an ass man. He'll be fine, and because I had to say something because it was so awkward. And I assure you he was not anything close to an ass man, so that was even worse that I said that about him. And she didn't laugh at all.
No,
and nobody laughed.
Which even makes the silence
worse.
The
nurse didn't laugh, but I laughed and slapped my knee, and I'm sure I snort laughed. And I just think that that kind of set the pace for me, because I realized that there's more to this, that it's not really just about me. I'm really getting this information because I think it's really remarkable that that's her conditioning. Yeah. And so that to me was a bigger story that I was ready to learn and take on. Yeah. And it was just fascinating.
Now, you said that you had a sense anyway that you probably had cancer, and I think I had heard that you had a reaction of almost relief. It sounded like when you felt that way.
And this brings us over to mental health for sure, because I think that we get busy and we don't really realize for sure. I mean, it's different now because we're talking 10 years ago, and now I think that we're more aware of our mental health and our stability, and how it's very much like an ocean. Our wellness comes in and out like a tide, depending on what's going on in our life, whether it's with work or with our family. And I just think that I hadn't realized how I'd never had a vacation since I was 18. I've only ever toured, and it was high pressure, high stress. I was so relieved that I thought, I can die, like I'm done. And what a glamorous, story. I would love to die young, good looking corpse, the whole thing. And I was really very comfortable with that feeling. It was definitely like a wash of relief.
Were you suicidal?
I don't believe I ever was. Right. I think that, part of me believes, and I'm just a lay person. I don't have any education or experience with suicidal patients per se. But every girlfriend I've ever had, every girl I know, for example, as we get older, we're more honest with each other when we have conversations. And I think for sure, I'm pretty confident that I have been in the pits of despair as an adolescent, for example, where I just couldn't go on. And I would lie on my bed, hot tears streaming down my face, fantasizing about, how I'm going to kill myself, primarily to punish, my parents, or I'll show them, they'll miss me. And I think that may have come up for me in my 20s, quite possibly again.
But with a cancer diagnosis, it was more so that you were
that was a relief.
You were just tired.
But I think that every girl that I've ever met has also confessed those same things. And I think that, but really, that is not like clinical suicidal ideology, and even in our language that we use, I have a lot of very funny friends who say things like, I'm going to blow my brains out. And that's something that we grew up saying as a common expression. And I think, again, that is not clinical suicidal ideology. Right. Same with anxieties, and now it's a real blanket statement. My goddaughter will have anxiety and about her math test. And I say, yes, of course, everyone's anxious about a math test, but it's not clinical anxiety.
Right.
And I think that, so for me, I know that even though, sure, if I can be honest, certainly, in my language over time, in my lifetime, I have said stuff like that. But I really don't think that really and truly that is what it is really about.
Yeah.
My husband has never had any in his lifetime, and he's been through, more than I have, I believe, in life, in relationships and stressors. It's never occurred to him. And I just think some people just are not wired that way.
Right.
No matter the pits of despair that they can ever be faced with, they just don't have that wiring.
Right.
And
it seems that you have a very, it's not even a different mindset. It's a very refreshing mindset. I think that your default coming into challenges is humor and optimism, looking for how you can use it for something good, it seems.
It's just so much fun.
Right.
No, really. I mean, it's just so, I don't even know how to be different. And again, I blame my parents
Right.
for that, just because that's how it is. But I also think being a performer has really helped me and aided me in that, because it would never occur to me to be any other way.
Yeah, and the music industry, probably more than most, maybe neck and neck with comedy industry. Certainly, drugs, depression, suicide happen all the time. You must have encountered that in your touring and your work with other musicians.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that for me, I stopped drinking alcohol when I was, I don't know, I'm going to say like 24. And primarily because I knew that I would lose my voice.
Right.
Really, that was my motivation. And I tell lots of jokes about I kept waking up in Italy. Or, but really, when my judgment is impaired, I talk too much, period, the end. And we would be on tour and I would lose my voice, and there was nothing worse. It was pretty rare that I would leave the flock and just go home with some dude or some, misadventure would befall me. But should it ever have happened, certainly there was alcohol involved.
Right.
So I always knew that if I wanted to really be a professional, I just simply couldn't drink. Everyone else could drink. I have no problem with that.
And you didn't feel the pressure of that around you all the time?
Not ever,
really?
because it was the fear of not singing well was greater than the fear of anything else. Yeah. And once Gail Greenwood was in my band, of course, Gail has been a straight edge her whole life. And which makes me laugh. I started smoking cigarettes at 10 years old, like every other kid in grade 5. And, it was, I don't know, she's never had a drop of alcohol or a puff of a joint. And I looked up to her. Right. So it was very, very easy for me to kind of, blend into that straight edge ideology. And it's weird, depending on where you go, it means different things. Lucky for me, I didn't eat meat because we were poor, basically. Right. And that was like my original way I got into being a vegetarian, and then vegan eventually, because we just didn't eat dairy. Why would we eat cheese? It's constipating. It was like, it was so simple. I was like, why would I ever eat that?
Yeah.
So, that's kind of how it started for me. It wasn't me, running out to try and X up my hands and be this straight edge kid, but it really served me well. And I think that people who do drink alcohol in a job that's so isolating, it doesn't matter if you have 5,000 kids in the mosh pit in front of your stage every night. It's very isolating.
How so? That's interesting. You would think you're always surrounded by people, right?
Which can be very lonely, because you really ultimately always have to have your game face on. And I think probably for men, I'm gonna guess it's more so than for women. I think men really aren't, at least the bands that I grew up liking and being around, it's not really recommended that they whine. It will be really kind of considered whining if they, confess that they're feeling lonely or anything, and the party's going on. You can't be a wet blanket, so.
And now you look at, Chester Bennington and so many others.
That's remarkable to me, and it is hard for us, the living, to understand for sure, because we sit there and go, this person had it all, plus children, same with Chris Cornell. And it's just, it's tragic. It really is.
But it sounds like you can kind of get at least a small piece of what they may have been feeling, that isolation, being surrounded by that idea that they have to suck it up, that they have to always have that face on.
Absolutely.
Right? The game face.
And again, this goes back to, being clinically depressed or having suicidal ideology. Like, there's something going on physiologically, chemically with the brain in that situation. And I think that that's not the experience of the majority of guys who are just isolated and lonely on tour, who are drinking and, maybe lean into alcoholism. And, that's something that is hard to correct, especially if you're always in that environment. And, it's not an easy job. I mean, there's a lot of different occupations that I'm sure lend themselves to that, whether you're in the military or law enforcement, anything, corrections, certainly. And if you're in a tour bus with, 10 other people all the time, definitely there's going to be stressors that wear you down.
Since your diagnosis, and it's been 10 years, you said, since
yes,
the
it
diagnosis
has.
treatment? Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Past the 10-year anniversary already, is it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy for that.
Yeah, and everything looks good now?
You know what? They kicked me out.
They kicked you out?
They kicked me out of the program. And, the thing with the Canadian government and our healthcare system is kind of interesting in a way. It was a great learning opportunity for me to just learn what that is like. And a lot of things are in place that do assist women in beating cancer for sure. But, if you need extra medications, like I had a blood clot in my surgical port and had to take a drug called Fragment, which is like a low molecular heparin. It's a blood thinner, basically. And they're pre-filled syringes. You have to self-inject your stomach fat or your leg or whatever. It's like, you got to talk yourself into it every morning and do it. But it's not covered because it doesn't affect the cancer cell.
Right.
So it is not covered. And if you do not have extended medical, it is not covered. And I was fascinated by that. Same with white blood cell boosters. If they're concerned that you are plummeting, your white blood cell count is plummeting in between your chemo treatments, you can access and utilize these fascinating little drugs that boost those white blood cells so that you will stay on your course and not miss the perfectly timed chemo. But if you do not have extended medical, you're not going to have that covered. It comes out of pocket. Most people can't afford that.
Right.
Breast cancer patients that I met throughout my treatment and still now as a volunteer, they all work through their chemo and they work full time. It's very luxurious for a woman to be able to take that time off.
Sure.
There's probably better, employers are probably a little bit better now and they can provide some type of leave of absence for people, but it's difficult to get.
Right.
And there's, it's just really, really revealing, all the gaps and how the system is a little bit tiered. If you have money, you'll be able to fight it a little better.
No, I'm sure that in addition to how physically taxing the treatment probably was for you, I mean, from everything, I've never fortunately had to go through with somebody who was going through cancer treatment, but emotionally as well, I imagine it must have been extremely difficult for you to navigate that, right?
Well, at the time, again, I only know being a performer. Right. So for me, going to chemotherapy, you're in a room with 5 other people. That is a captive audience.
Sure.
Like for me, that's a captive audience. And of course, the mood in the room is somber.
And how long does a typical course take?
For example, like you're there for probably a couple hours.
Yeah.
And you go every 3 weeks. Although now treatments have evolved, and if a patient doesn't tolerate it very well, then they'll find a way to try and dial it in for that particular individual. They can go every week and have lesser dose, or I mean, it's a miracle what they have now.
But chances are you're in that small room with a few people for a few hours, usually.
Generally. Yeah. And often, that maybe they have a family member come with them or their friends. And it depends, but I just again, I'm a chatty person. And even though I was bald, I bought wigs that were blonde, so that I would be in a disguise. It never worked.
Did people always recognize you?
Always. Yeah. And it was loads of fun. And I had so much fun.
Right.
I had so much fun every time. I loved to tease the nurses and, yell and pretend I'm ticklish all the time. And, we just had a riot every time. And I just thought, wow, that's something that I think is important. Everybody needs a clown in the room. And so even when I was done my treatment, I volunteered to accompany patients go for their own treatment. And I think that, it was something that really changed the entire experience for me because I never experienced it as a bad thing. I called it the good medicine day because really that's what it is. Right. And I think that, there is a lot of fear for a lot of people. They are afraid of dying. Sure. And I never have been because I just, couldn't believe all the jams I got out of in my life. I didn't die. Holy shit, I didn't die, or whatever. Right. And so I have a bit of a different attitude. And it's hard for me to be able to discern whether it's just my, bullshit coping technique that I just don't know any better. It's just how I do things. I don't think there was one time, even though it's quite cumulative, and towards the end of your chemo appointments, you are weary,
Sure.
And that's a physiological thing, and it affects your serotonin and your dopamine. You're getting worn down. It's exhausting. But I never stopped performing, and that's really what got me through it.
To come back to the idea of religion and your tattoos and your connection to a variety of different religions, it seems. Was there anything from that upbringing, from those beliefs that really informed how you approach death and your optimistic take, your choice of optimism, it seems, in many ways in these kinds of situations? I
don't know for sure. I don't think that because we didn't live near my grandparents, I didn't see them frequently. And when they died, it didn't really, I don't think that it really resonated with me at all. I never had any fear of death. And my father used to always brag to us kids about his Buddhist friends who were the only ones smiling at funerals. And he always said, do you know why a Buddhist smiles at a funeral? And it was like we would roll our eyes. Dad, you've told us this a million times. And it was really the neutrality that my parents always kind of said, well, the body dies. That's all it is. And they would never say, this is where your soul goes, or you have a spirit that goes in it. They would never say that. My father would always ask the question, do you think that you have a soul? Or do you wonder if your soul's going to go somewhere? He would always ask a question. So I think that we were allowed to just explore what that looked like and what we thought about it. And I think that I think that my childish version of heaven and hell was probably very different than it is today.
What is it today?
I don't know. I think it's still evolving, and I think it is for everyone because we're pragmatic. I think that, as we get older, we're very practical. And, I think probably many people lean into agnostic beliefs because it just seems kind of like the diplomatic thing to do. Why wouldn't we just be open to anything? I love making jokes about it, and saying that's when the aliens come or like whatever, because there's so many different beliefs. And even though I think some of them are extremely hilarious, they mean something to that person. So I don't know, I think that, I think it's all cool. I really, I love the idea of helping people work through their fear as they transition. Doing any palliative care volunteering that I've done, it's always just because I was asked. And almost always it's with breast cancer patients or their families. And that's a different energy. And every patient is different. And every patient dies differently, whether it's a slow or a long hospice situation. And I think I'm still learning what that's about. I have a very keen interest in it. Often I feel like I'm going to quit my job and go back to school because I'm so passionate about patients and end-of-life work. Just through our own like yoga practicing and being a meditator, I like the idea of being able to go in a room and meditate with people or their families, and in any whatever form that looks like for them. And there's a lot of different rituals people do with the dying. I've seen, I've had lots of laughs with palliative patients who are like, please get my family out of here. They're all wearing black again. And we laugh our heads off because like, yeah, do you mind going home and like, it's
grieving at home.
It's just like so funny.
What have you learned actually then from spending so much time with dying people and from yourself essentially dying for a period of time?
Well, I think that people get really clear, and I think it's an opportunity for us who are not palliative patients to therefore learn from that and get clear. And what I mean is, all the priorities shift. Things get really clear when, you don't have any more time. And you have a bucket list of things you need to do. There's tasks, emotional tasks that you want to accomplish, so that you can feel satisfied. Really, that's the bottom line. You're in your final chapter. How do you get to write that chapter yourself? Because only you can write it. Unless of course you're a patient's incapacitated. But I just think that that's something that I love exploring. I think it's really it's something I'm driven to do. And I wouldn't have known that had I not been thrown into that situation as a patient.
So are you satisfied, or do you still have more to do?
I've always been satisfied. I don't know why. I just think that, I don't know. Like, do I think my dad and my dead dogs are waiting for me on the other side? Maybe. I don't know. That'd be really super cool. But ultimately, you can look at it like, I think it was an episode of Family Guy, which I'm only familiar with because my husband watches it constantly. And there was an episode where the baby, Stewie, is like, hates his family and winds up getting reborn into a different family. And he dies, and then suddenly he wakes up like, and the doctor's pulling him out. And I think a lot of people believe that's what happens.
Sure. Do you believe in reincarnation?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know. Sometimes I do. I think it would be really great. For a lot of people, like there's a lot of deaths that are really unfair. With young people or people who didn't get an opportunity. Like really like small children and stuff like that. For them and for their little spirit, I hope that would be something that they would get an opportunity to go change the world in another body. Who knows? Yeah. But I'm always the kind of person who's just open to anything. Yeah. It's all cool.
Yeah. So what's next for you then? What are you going to be, what are you working on now? And then what are you hoping to conquer next?
Oh boy, so much stuff. Well, I just finished a record. Yeah. So we're getting ready to drop some of those tracks, and the music industry's changed, and how we put out music has changed. Sure, yeah. So the element of surprise is kind of gone in a way.
When was your last record?
The last studio album that I put out was 2012, which was an acoustic record. Yeah. And then this record it's exciting. Yeah. It's just I'm really happy to have done it. I wrote a book of poetry. Oh, nice. And that's finished, and now I'm still working on my cancer book, which is now third year. And I find that I get lost in the research because I want to get it right. And it's basically my version of a how-to book.
How to cope?
How to have a great fucking time, during these terribly challenging experiences we go through in life, and it just seemed like a right fit to kind of lean it into a cancer subject matter, just because that's my lived experience.
That's a great title. I don't know if you have a title yet or not, but how to have a great fucking time in cancer treatment. That is a great. I would buy that.
Good. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, Bif, thank you so much for coming in. I feel like I could talk to you forever, but thank you so much for your work that you're doing in this space, for your wonderful career, and
thank you.
It's exciting to see all the stuff that you have coming up in the future as well. I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bif. That's it. That's my conversation with the legendary, the icon, Bif Naked. Go check out her book, Bif Naked, Ibificus Songs and Stories Tour, which she's currently on now, talking about the stories that you just heard here in the book and in her speaking engagements. And certainly check out her music, especially the old stuff again too, but the new stuff. She's always creating something new, and I think you can hear how deeply informed it is by her personal experience and her deep empathy and history that she's been sharing with her talent for so many years. So I'm grateful to Bif. Thank you for coming on the show. If you liked it, and I hope you did, I did, please share it. Share it everywhere. My social platforms, I'm at Mark Hennick, at MarkHenick on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere else. So give me your feedback. Share what you liked. Share some quotes. Tell me what you learned from the episode. You can do that in the comments section as well over on Apple Podcasts if that's where you're listening. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts to So-Called Normal, subscribe to the show. Leave us a star rating on there as well. That really helps to give the show some visibility. You can do that too wherever else you're listening, if it's Google Podcasts or Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Deezer, wherever else. Subscribe to the show, listen, and share, please. I'd like to thank everybody at E1, Jonathan, Harrison, Adrian, Kimberly, everybody else who makes it possible, Allison, why not, everybody, as well as my incredible editor, Dave, who brought it all together today. I think that's it. Okay, until next time, this has been So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick.